I always thought betrayal would be loud, full of shouting and slammed doors and words you could point to later and say that was the moment everything broke. But the night it happened to me, it was quiet. So quiet it almost passed for normal. I came home to my house in Fort Collins, Colorado after a work trip that ran shorter than expected and noticed beings that didn't belong to me before I noticed anything else. Boxes stacked neatly near the entryway, not messy or rushed, just placed there like they had always been part of the room. Shoes by the door that weren't mine, lined up carefully, respectful even. A medium-sized suitcase leaned against the wall beneath the coat hooks, positioned with a confidence that made my stomach tighten before my mind caught up. The house didn't look broken into, it looked occupied. My mother, Susan, had used the emergency key I gave her to move my unemployed sister into my home while I was gone. No call, no text, no warning, no permission. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't confront anyone that night. I stood there longer than I should have, letting the reality settle in slowly, the way cold does when it seeps through your clothes instead of hitting you all at once. My name is Emily. I'm 31 years old and I work in commercial property oversight and asset evaluation. My job taught me something most people don't learn until it costs them something permanent. Ownership isn't emotional. It's structural. It's defined, documented, enforced. That mindset didn't come from ambition or confidence. It came from necessity. I didn't grow up in a household where people screamed at each other. There were no explosive arguments or dramatic ultimatums. What we had was subtler and harder to defend against. My mother had a way of presenting control as care. Every question came wrapped in concern. Every suggestion carried an expectation. Silence was never empty, it was loaded. It meant you were supposed to know what to do without being told. I learned early that peace didn't come from honesty, it came from compliance, from choosing the right tone, from smoothing things over before they turned sharp. My younger sister Megan learned something else entirely. Where I learned to stand on my own, she learned to wait. Wait for help, wait for things to improve, wait for someone else to step in. She moved from one unstable situation to another, always just close enough to watch what I was building, never close enough to understand the cost of it. When I bought my house, I didn't tell anyone right away. Not because I wasn't proud, but because pride felt dangerous in a family where success quietly shifted power dynamics. The house wasn't big or flashy, it was practical, clean, mine. Every payment, every utility, every decision was handled by me alone. When I eventually gave my mother a spare key, I was very clear. I didn't soften it with humor or reassurance. I told her that key was for emergencies only, not visits, not convenience, not decisions made on my behalf. If I was unreachable and something serious happened, she could use it. Otherwise, that door stayed closed. She listened without interrupting, nodded once, and said nothing. At the time, I mistook silence for understanding. A few months later, the energy shifted. My mother started stopping by more often, not to see me, but to walk through my space. Her eyes lingered on rooms instead of people. She opened doors I usually kept closed. She stood in the hallway longer than necessary. Once, while looking into the spare bedroom I intentionally kept empty, she said softly that no one should live alone in a place like this. It didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a plan being rehearsed. Then, a cousin mentioned casually that Megan no longer had stable housing. Megan never told me herself. She never asked for help. She never called. And that's when the pressure started to feel heavier, like something was already moving toward me quietly without my consent. The work trip wasn't supposed to feel rushed. I had inspections scheduled across northern Colorado, long days walking through properties that smelled like dust and fresh paint. It was predictable, controlled, safe. But by the second night, an unease settled in my chest without explanation. I told myself it was stress. I finished early and drove home without telling anyone. From the outside, the house looked normal. Lights off, quiet street, nothing broken. That almost fooled me. The moment I opened the door, the air felt wrong. Not dirty, not chaotic, just occupied. Boxes lined the wall carefully, shoes by the door positioned like they belonged there. A faint scent of a different laundry detergent hung in the hallway, sharp and unfamiliar. I stepped inside slowly, every sound amplified. The living room was the same, but not. A book moved, a pillow angled differently. The spare room I kept empty wasn't empty anymore. That's when Megan walked out of the guest room. She didn't look surprised, no apology, no hesitation. She looked settled, like someone who had already unpacked emotionally, even if the boxes were still sealed. I asked her what she was doing in my house. My voice stayed even, but it felt tight, like I was holding something back deliberately. She shrugged and said Mom told her it was already handled. That sentence explained everything without explaining anything at all. I walked past her down the hallway. Drawers had been rearranged, closet space adjusted. The guest room had been turned into something intentional, not temporary. Bedding smoothed, her bag tucked neatly into the corner like it had been measured for the space. That's when it hit me. The emergency key, the one meant for disasters. It hadn't been borrowed, it had been used. Megan moved through the house like she belonged there, touching counters, talking casually about where she might put a desk. She didn't ask, she assumed. I realized then that this wasn't about her needing help, it was about access, about my mother deciding that my boundaries were suggestions instead of rules. I didn't argue, I didn't explain my feelings, because feelings don't matter when a line has already been crossed. I went into my bedroom, locked the door, and lay awake the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, not because I was afraid, but because something had become very clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't temporary, and it wasn't going to fix itself if I stayed quiet. Silence had trained them. Every time I let something slide to keep the peace, it taught me my space was flexible, negotiable, available. By morning, I knew that if I didn't act, my home would stop being mine in ways I might not be able to undo. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was afraid, but because my mind kept replaying the same realization over and over until it lost its edges and became solid. Silence hadn't protected me, it had instructed them. Every time I swallowed discomfort to avoid tension, it taught them my boundaries were temporary, that my space could be adjusted without asking, that my consent could be assumed. By morning, the decision was already made. I asked my mother to come over. When she arrived, she walked in like nothing was wrong, like this was another family conversation she could manage with the right tone and timing. Megan stayed close behind her, quiet, present in a way that felt heavy without words. I didn't sit down. I stood in the living room and spoke carefully, deliberately. I told my mother that ownership wasn't emotional, that blood didn't override property rights. I reminded her exactly what the emergency key was for, not visits, not convenience, not decisions made while I was gone. She smiled softly, the kind of smile meant to calm a situation without changing it. She talked about family, about responsibility, about how I had space and Megan didn't, as if those facts automatically rewrote the law. Megan added a few sentences, chosen carefully. She said it was temporary. She said she just needed time. She didn't ask. She framed it like something already granted. I listened until the room felt too tight to breathe in. Then I said one sentence. You don't have permission to be here. The air changed immediately. My mother's voice sharpened, not loud, just firm. She told me I was overreacting, that I was being dramatic, that no one was hurting me. That was the moment I understood they weren't confused, they were confident I would bend. I picked up my phone. My hand didn't shake, my voice didn't crack. I told the operator there were people inside my home without my consent who refused to leave. Saying it out loud felt unreal, like translating something deeply personal into a public record. When the officers arrived, everything slowed. Their questions were neutral, their movements measured. They asked for identification, they reviewed documents. My mother tried to reframe it as a family misunderstanding. One officer explained calmly that family didn't cancel property rights, that entering without permission was trespassing. There were no raised voices, just a warning and a clear instruction to leave. After the door closed, the house felt hollow, bigger, too quiet. I waited for relief to arrive. It didn't. What settled in instead was colder, certainty. Being warned wasn't the same as being stopped. Some people don't retreat when confronted, they regroup. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of metal scraping softly against my front door. Not loud enough to be dramatic, that's what made it worse. Slow, careful, deliberate. I lay still, listening, then opened the security app on my phone. The porch camera loaded under the pale motion sensor light. My mother stood inches from my door, relaxed, arms loosely folded. Beside her, a man I didn't recognize crouched near the lock, a small black case open at his knees. Thin metal tools moved confidently in his hands like this was routine. That's when fear finally arrived. Not panic, not chaos, something colder. The kind that tells you this isn't emotional anymore. This is a safety issue. I moved quietly down the hallway and stopped far enough from the door to stay unseen. I could feel the vibration each time his tools scraped the lock. The sound felt invasive, personal. I called 911 without hesitation. I told them someone was actively attempting to enter my home without consent. When the operator asked who was outside, saying my mother out loud felt heavier than anything else that morning. Red and blue lights flooded the porch before I heard the sirens. Commands cut through the quiet street. The man froze, dropped his tools, and was ordered to the ground. My mother was pulled away from the door. This time, there were no warnings dressed as advice. Everything moved with weight. I stayed inside and watched through the camera as paperwork came out. Pens moved, radios crackled. My mother gestured with frustration, not shame. That's when I realized the first incident hadn't scared her. It had offended her. After the lights faded, my hands shook for the first time. A week later, I found the paperwork, hidden in a closet behind folded blankets. Documents with my name and address, clauses about long-term residency, shared bills, permission to occupy, my signature at the bottom, not my handwriting. This wasn't overstepping, it was strategy. I took it straight to a lawyer. He explained how close I'd come to losing control of my own home. Silence would have finished the job. With his guidance, I built a legal wall around my life. Formal notices, documentation, records that couldn't be rewritten. The second police report changed everything. Pattern, intent. The outcome wasn't loud. My mother faced legal penalties and restrictions. Megan left the city quietly. I replaced every lock, reinforced every entry point. The house felt smaller afterward, not because I lost something, but because it finally belonged to me again. I used to think love meant tolerance. I learned it means protection. Family doesn't get a free pass to erase your boundaries. If you've ever had to choose yourself when no one else would, you're not wrong for that. If this story resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends who might need to hear it, and comment below with your perspective or the lesson you took from it.